The outer planets are talking this week as we open up the month of July. So we got Neptune retrograding in Aries, and then Uranus is finally making its way into Gemini. Fire and air are here. So how do we conjure with this energy so that it does not burn us up? This is the astrological weekly forecast for July 2nd through 8th. So let's get into it, y'all. So welcome back to Yappin with the Stars, the show where I talk about life and spirit with the help of this planets, stars, and zodiacs, and a little bit of common sense thrown in there as well. I'm your host and guide, Dr. Nicole Rouse, artist, astrologer, anthropologist, and overall dreamer. And here we do astrology and anthropology my way, grounded in the body, tied to spirit, and connected to the world that we're actually living in. Now, every Wednesday, we check into the chaos we call society and ask two questions. What's the cosmos showing us this week? And what are we being called to move, create, burn, or build? Now, before we get into it, I got a couple of reminders for folks. As part of my Embodied Futures Lab, I am teaching an online seminar called Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts on July 12th. It's at 1 p.m. And so over the course of 3 hours, what we're going to do is we're going to get into these concepts of spirituality, spirit, gifts, as a way for us to understand why, in order to access our gifts, we have to come back into being human, coming back into the body. So I'll explain what the human is, how it converted into man, and why it's necessary to come back into the human again, which is what the astrology is showing us. And this will bring the astrology in, and we'll work with the nodes of the moon, along with the dark houses 4, 8, and 12, to learn how we can work with astrology to help us access our spiritual gifts via accessing and believing our humanity. So I'm excited for this seminar. I've been doing these types of teachings for a while, and now I package it together into a introductory course. So again, if you're interested, this is through my Embodied Futures Lab. You can sign up online on my website, drnicolerouse.com. Again, it'll be July 12th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Now, if you are interested in one-on-one astrological assessments with me, I do offer those as well as part of my lab offerings and services. I have a number of different astrological assessments available, both individual and couple, and I'm not just romantic couples, so parent-child, business, romance, and the like. So for more information about that, also check out my website under the Astrological Assessments tab. That is part of my Embodied Futures Lab. And finally, if you want to work and learn more with me, the praxis arm of my lab right now is my Patreon. So check out my Patreon. There I have divination study sessions. We have a book club. Oh, right now, y'all, right now, if you're watching this, I'm going to show the book we're going to be reading again, or starting to read. N.K. Jemisin's The 100,000 Kingdoms. This book is awesome. I am highly enjoying it. So we'll be working with, because we're talking about myths and story making and storytelling as a means of reclaiming what it means to be human once again, so that we can embody our realities and learn how to strategize with our dreams, which is my praxis, embodied strategic dreaming. That's the methodology of my lab, the Embodied Futures Lab. So if you're interested in more about that, if you want to learn what this process is, I'll be having more information in the public about that later in the year, but I've been really beta testing a lot of this stuff in my Patreon. So if you're interested and curious, go ahead and check out my Patreon, y'all. Now let's get into the weekly forecast, since we're talking about stories and storytelling, because this is really, again, the overall kind of energy that the cosmos and these transits are showing us. It is time to rewrite the stories, because if we don't, then they get rewritten for us, and that is how states take over and maintain themselves. But right now, because of not only the shifts of the outer planets, but also these retrogrades, we are really being called to ask and review, what does it mean for us to create the future to say we won by actually believing the realities that we are in currently. So let's get into it. Now, again, Wednesday to Wednesday, we go here. So on July 2nd, the moon is going to start off in Libra, and it's going to end in Sagittarius on the 8th. So this week is really about the relationships we have and how we essentially show up for them, in them, and construct them, and the lessons we learn through them. Okay, and I say this because on the 2nd, we're also going to see Venus making her way into Gemini slowly. So she'll be at 27 degrees of Taurus on the 2nd, and by the 4th, her and Uranus will be meeting up in Taurus at 29 degrees. So what does this mean? Don't be surprised if unexpected things happen when it comes to relationships and finances, especially on a collective level. Now, you've got to look at your own chart to see how this will impact you based upon your personal planets and placements. That's the importance of a transit reading, y'all. Transit readings, so the weekly forecasts that I'm giving now are general, right? They're general. It's where the stars are, where the planets are, and during this time period. But if you want to see how it can impact you, because again, not all transits personally impact us, but transits have a collective impact, which then can personalize themselves through us. Okay, that is when you get a transit. You look at your transit chart, you can get a transit reading. All right, so that's when I'm talking about these forecasts. Put that into context. You can always have to use your own chart to see how this can impact you. Now, that being said, it's still an outer planet hitting a personal planet. So there's always caveats to these things. So since it's Venus, personal planet, which is about love and relationships and money and culture and the like, the feel good things of life, reminding us that to be human, there does need to be some pleasure, is meeting up with the outer planet of change, chaos, rebellion, electricity, right? This is the energy of what does it look like for us to change our understandings of Venetian things, right? So this is us really having to reevaluate how we engage with relationships, contracts, and money. This is an ongoing story. Why do I say that? Because of when Venus was in Aries. Remember that long Venus Pisces, Aries kind of flip flop. I talked about this last week as well. We were being asked then to start to bend our relationship to Venetian concepts, especially as it relates to how patriarchy has shaped our understandings of the matriarchy and motherhood and all those things. This is still that conversation because now it's going to be moving from the rootedness of Taurus, right? Because again, Uranus has been shaking up the most rooted parts of our chart, but also the most rooted parts of society. The idea that these structures were sound economically, that somehow the foundations of our needs were met, has been completely upended these past 8 years. Really longer than that, because Pluto and Capricorn started this in 2008 with the breakdown of the economy, with the recession, right? And so we're seeing a gradual progression of the ways that the stories we've been told about these nation states and its economic basis do not match the reality because our material needs are not being met. So what happens then when we believe our material reality and then put that in conversation with action we need to take in order to ensure that we have the resources that we need? So this transit is going to keep highlighting this, and it's going to be an ongoing thing because once Venus makes her way into Gemini, Uranus will follow after that a couple of days later. So there's still going to be some contact here. And with Uranus now moving into Gemini, it's going to start solidifying that grand trine between Pluto and Aquarius and Neptune and Aries. So that's going to be here for a few years because of how slow moving these planets are with retrogrades. So we got the outer planets asking us to really start to reevaluate our relationships to these concepts, the way we communicate and think, the collective itself, and how we have to start to own our own heads. In order for us to do that, we have to take back collectively the constructs and confines that have constructed society that we are in. And the basis of that are the stories we tell, the histories we invoke, and how that then impacts how we understand ourselves and the human. All right. Does that make sense, y'all? Let me know in the show notes below if what I'm saying is resonating at all or if it makes sense. I'm not asking you if you necessarily agree, but I'm asking if it resonates a little bit and makes sense. Okay. So with Gemini energy going to be invoked later on, and Gemini, right, is mercurial. It's communication. It's how we communicate. It's transportation as well. Mercury does rule money. We forget that a lot. Pluto and Mercury are also in a conversation with money because it's commerce, it's banks, right? So we have money at the table. The ways in which we think about resources, resource sharing. In Gemini, this dualistic sign, right? The question for me that I feel like these transits are asking us is, do we dare to rewrite the scripts of how we understand love, money, and relationships? And this is foundational, y'all. If we think about the conversation that Jupiter in Cancer, as it squares Saturn and Neptune in Aries, this is also about us reevaluating our relationship between to mothering and care and nurturing, right? We need nurturing and care in order to be human. The human is part of this conversation once again. But do we know how to be human? Part of being human are things like pleasure, are things like are very Venusian in nature, the culture, and all those things. But if we're afraid of our bodies, therefore afraid to engage with the emotions that help us understand and process the experiences we are having, then there is no way for us to actually take charge of our stories of collectively if we don't take charge of our stories individually. So we need to then rethink, what is a relationship? And it's not just romantic. How do we show up in them? How do we define them? So then how do you define things like friendship, community, acquaintance, family? All of these things need to be rewritten because they're the foundations of society. They are the foundations that help then solidify the Tauresian understandings of our life, the material existence of our life, right? If we don't have foundations of relationships that are through a praxis of love and care, right, so that our material needs are met, then what are we really doing? Right? What kind of future are we truly creating? So there is this kind of interplay between the personal, right, these inner planets, and the structural, the outer planets, because they're always in a conversation. Now, on the 4th, like I said, Taurus and Uranus meet at 29 degrees, critical degree, ending some shit, bending some shit, breaking some shit, right? And at the same time, Neptune goes retrograde in Aries this day. Now, Neptune's going to be retrograde until about December 10th. And on December 10th, Neptune will be at 29 degrees Pisces. Okay. So, and again, what is Pisces? It's the deep waters, Neptune, the planet of spirituality, intuition, right? And the ways in which we formulate the kind of constructs. This is the stories, this is the glamour, this is, think Hollywood, right? Think the ways that culture is constructed collectively in the deep waters of Pisces, the collective consciousness, right? So as Neptune is making her way retrograde from Aries into Pisces and ending at the critical degree before she then goes direct and will be in Aries then in 2026 for a decade and some change, we're being again asked to reflect upon what we learned when we had to go into the deep waters of the collective of society. Did those stories make sense? Do the collectives that we're a part of make sense? What do we actually need? What is the underlying understanding of our relationship to the sacred so that we have an understanding of the mundane? This is really a review about who are the gods that we are beholden to. Neptune is the deep waters. Neptune is the planet that also commands the dead. The dead below are lie at the bottom of the waters, right? But now they have risen. The dead are risen onto land. Neptune is now drying off in Aries. And then the Lord of the underworld, Pluto, right, is now in the sign of the collective, Aquarius. So the Lord of the underworld is ushering in the collective dead, but whose stories are we bringing? Which dead are we invoking? And do we even understand the history enough to know what it means to learn from that in the present day? Okay. So here we're being asked to reflect. Pluto in Aquarius is in retrograde. Neptune in Aries is retrograde. It is a time to stop reacting to things, and now is a time to start embodying, to start believing, to start working with these elements, fire and air. So if what's going on is igniting you up, if what is going on is pissing you off, if what is going on has finally gotten you to see the limitations of these structures and systems, okay, then you need time to process. We need time to process. We need time to strategize. We need time to understand better what we have gone through to transmute that into wisdom so that the strategies we deploy going forward are different, are new, can actually work through. But do we take the time? Are we able to allow ourselves the pause so that we really do feel, so that we can embody, believe, and then move differently? See, this is the stuff that we have to ask ourselves, especially as we are entering into the elements of fire and air once again with these outer planets. And I'll talk about that later in the show in Astrology 101. Now, on the 5th, Venus then makes her way into Gemini. So Venus moves out of the sign that it likes to be in, Taurus, and moves into the air sign of Gemini. And Venus will then be forming that grand trine with Pluto in Aquarius and Neptune and Saturn in Aries, okay? Now, also that day on the 5th, the sun in Cancer will be making a trine to the moon in Scorpio. So the waters are activated in you. And so you will feel fire and air collectively. So I want to say this on the 5th, because the moon and the sun are in water that day and they're having a conversation, a nice one, there is a way that we will be feeling this shift of fire and air. Okay, Venus moving into air, the outer Pluto and Neptune doing what it's doing, because then on the 7th, here, the 5th, Uranus is still at a critical degree of Taurus. By the 7th, Uranus now makes their way into Gemini. Again, solidifying more of that grand trine between Neptune and Pluto. So as the outer planets are in all new signs, this brings in a new era of fire and air. But it's just a preview, a taste, as retrogrades are and will continue to happen, bringing Uranus and Neptune back into earth and water for a little bit. So Uranus will retrograde back into Taurus for a little bit. Like I said earlier, Neptune will go back into Pisces for a little bit, right? Before they both make their ways back into new signs where they will stay. This is change via air. So prepare for new ways of knowing and being to come into the collective. But how is your discernment, right? How is your discernment? Do you trust yourself or do you look to others for the direction to go into? Now, this is bringing in the South Node in Virgo. And I talked about this a little bit last week, but we are being asked to make space in how we even understand knowledge, how we take in knowledge and how we engage with it, because Virgo was the other side of Mercury. So now that Uranus will be making its way into Gemini, the air sign of Mercury, Virgo being the earth sign of Mercury, there is a way the body is more important now than ever, because Uranus has been disrupting Taurus for the past, 8 years. There's been disruption to the foundations of materiality of our existence, which also impacts our body. South Node in Virgo, there is a way, and a lot of clients I've been working with the past few months themselves have been going through stomach problems, or they're seeing that they have to have a different relationship to food, that they have to be more conscious of what they are putting in the body, because what's coming out of the body is kind of this release, because we need to make space, make way for us to really understand what we believe, what we think, what we know. But do you even know your own head? Do you know your own voice? Or are other people's voices the ones dominating, but in your tone? So this is about discernment. This is about, can we turn the body on by making space and releasing these concepts and ideas that told us somehow our emotions, somehow parts of our humanity need to be turned off for liberation, when in actuality, the only way we can liberate ourselves is by coming into the self, into the body, and the way our body talks to us is through our emotions. All right, so this is an activation. It's been activated, but now that the body is a bit turned on, we got to go to the mind. But since we are so used to having the mind lead, Uranus and Gemini is really going to kind of break that up. It's going to be change. It's going to be different. It's going to be different ways that we are going to be introduced to what could come next. This is future building. This is world making. But who is making the worlds? Who is making the worlds? What is the foundation of those worlds? And are those worlds actually different because we believe the structures we are in now? Or are they just different fonts of what already is because our imaginations are bounded by those colonial understandings of life and living? So retrograde Neptune and Pluto, we got to review. What are the stories? What is the histories? Who are we looking to in the past to help us understand the present moment? And are we actually humanizing that past so that we can learn from it? Or are we deifying it because that's all we know how to do? So therefore making it stagnant, reproducing what already is. And since we already know what already is constructed to the present day, we have to then break from that kind of loop to create new pathways. So how do we do that? Let's get into some astrology one-on-one because I want to talk about the elements. All right. This is elements. This is elemental. The body is elemental, y'all. So we have to understand the elements that compose the body so that we understand how interconnected we are to other forms of life. And again, this is why astrology to me is a great one way, not the only, one way to truly understand that, because the elements are also in the chart. And so you can look at your chart in so many different ways. And when I work with clients, I like to look at the elements that dominate, but also the elements missing, especially when we're talking about understanding and accessing your spiritual gifts. A lot of times that is being kind of going into ritual, creating rituals for yourself that work with certain elements so that you are actually invoking what needs to be invoked so that you can start to hear yourself. Okay. So let's talk about the outer planets and how to kind of work with this and think about this in relationship to your own charts. Okay. So again, we're seeing the elements change signs. So we are going from a time in which we were in water and earth. So when Uranus was in Taurus, Neptune was in Pisces, and Pluto was in Capricorn, earth and water were dominant. Now, during that time, we saw some massive changes occurring to the most kind of quote unquote rooted parts of society, food and water, right? Food and water resources were really highlighted over this time period. So think Pluto went into Aquarius, or excuse me, Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008. So think from 2008 to the present day. And then after 2008, the other two planets also changed signs. But during this time, we are seeing this is a time in which illusions and glamour ruled, and there was kind of a focus on opulence and displays of wealth via consumerism, while at the same time, we also saw economic collapse. We saw complete reshifting of food systems, of the rollback of kind of policies and rights that were meant to protect. We saw people fighting for rights, water rights in particular. In the US, it's Flint. We had Standing Rock, right? As a couple of examples, we have the ongoing issues in various parts of the world, especially in the Congo, when it comes to resources and rights, right? So we are seeing kind of this kind of dualistic understanding of what it means for us to have to work with the earth, because it is earth and water that sustain us. That makes sense, y'all, okay? Now, during this time, we also see people wanting to return to a quote unquote simpler way of life, with the focus on things like farm to table, locally grown, community, and all of that. So as the structures were cracking, there was a realization that this idea of the global, this idea of the world as being the next frontier, really had to be questioned, because how can you go global if you refuse to start local? So they were in a time in which we were trying to figure out where are our feet, right? Water, because Pisces, where are the feet? Because the so-called solidness of the earth was shifting. Now, in your own chart, you can actually look to see what houses are ruled by water and earth signs. And then when you do that, you can contemplate how that element shows up in that area of life. And then looking at the house that the outer planets were in, how that has also shifted for you. Okay. So what do I mean by this, y'all? Let me use my chart as an example of how to do this. So I'm a Scorpio rising, which means Earth rules my 3rd, 7th, and 11th houses. So Earth rules things like my communication, my understandings of community, my one-on-one relationships, contracts, organizations and institutions I'm a part of, and also my understandings of freedom and equality. So those are areas of my life that I do tend to be more rooted in, regardless if it is a mutable, cardinal, or fixed earth sign. It's still earth, it's still rootedness, it's still groundedness. And so I have to be careful not to hold on to relationships, locations, and dreams for too long, because while grounded, the earth still undergoes change. And we see this as the seasons change, right? So again, while grounded, change still is there. And so currently, the South Node in Virgo is in my 11th house, and it's working my ass, along with Uranus at its final degrees in Taurus in my 7th house. And Pluto previously took me through a death and transformation of my communication, my local and community, my relationship to my siblings and where I came from as it went through my third house when it was in Capricorn. And so I had to really start to understand that my intuition did need to be part of how I understood communication and who I then engaged in community with, because the third house is also where the moon finds her joy. It is the house of the goddess. So Pluto and the Lord of the Underworld really did take me through a kind of brutal, I'm not going to lie, because I went through some shit, but a brutal but needed death and transformation, so that I started to understand that the intuition, the things that I was feeling, the kind of knowing that I couldn't explain from a book, right, or from some kind of methodological reasoning that I've been trained to do and to utilize in the academy. Pluto said, that's cute, but what else? Right? You got to bring this online. And so I'm getting reminded of this right now as Virgo, South Node in Virgo is reminding me in my 11th house is that I have to release the ways that I've been taught knowledge through these institutions. It doesn't mean that I'm throwing my degrees out the window, not at all. What I am learning is that that is one understanding of knowledge and knowledge production. I've talked about this all the time when I was in the academy. Western knowledge production, Western science production has a certain kind of understanding of itself that has made itself the universal understanding of knowledge, when it is not. It is one way to understand knowledge. It is one logic that also draws upon many other logics that it just reconstituted through its perspective, its line of sight, its lens. So what happens if you put that as one location of knowing, not the location of knowing? Well, then that is completely transforming the organizations, groups that I want to actually work with as part of my lab, as part of my work overall, including my studio, my dream praxis studio, because my hopes and dreams have shifted. They completely shifted as my one-on-one relationships have shifted the last 8 years. Uranus and Taurus, going through the most rooted part of my chart, by contracts, who I am in relationship with. So what the hell did that do to me? Well, I got divorced. I completely changed my community. Good friends that I thought were friends. Once I left those institutions, I realized that the relationships tied to the institutions, not tied to me, not tied to us as humans, as our relation, right? So I've had my whole community shift. I had my whole friendship group shift. And people in my past who were really for me have shown up again, and the new folks have entered into my life as I've also understand my relationship to my queerness, which helped me understand why my whole life I felt uncomfortable trying to perform these ideas of relationship to be in relationship with others. But once I broke that understanding of my relationship to heteronormativity, it broke all of those connected relationships. And so as I step into my relationship to queerness, see, all kinds of relationships, then it is opening me up to a whole different set of understandings of myself, my community, and my hopes and dreams and who I want to work with. And that directly relates then to the water houses, because Virgo is hitting the water house of Pisces. And my water houses then are my first house, my fifth house, and my ninth house. So all of this has also helped me with water, helping me understand that I must flow and allow my sense of self to evolve, first house. And that goes with my creativity, my fifth house of Pisces, because that's how I truly find, quote unquote, God, which is the higher self, the ninth house. So water and earth have really shaken up parts of my understanding of self. And as the outer planets were triggering those elements, it also triggered those other houses that were ruled by those elements. So I hope this makes sense, y'all. So look at your own charts. Look at your own charts and do this for yourself. What is the story that was told? What is the story that is being told with your earth and water signs, and how the outer planets helped you shape and transform them? Because again, the outer planets all work with transformation, just in different ways. So do that exercise, because it's good to review so that you learn from your own past. This is wisdom, right? This is turning experiences and knowledges into wisdom. And this will also help as we enter now into the elements of fire and air. So earth and water are feminine in nature. Fire and air are masculine in nature. What did you learn about learning how to receive? What did you learn about the concept of care, the concept of what you do need in order to support that water and earth? Because now we're entering into fire and air action. That learning, that knowing, that reconstruction of some of the most rooted parts of you. What is that done to help you understand what you need to do, what action needs to be taken, what action even looks like? Okay. Because when you go into fire and air, look at those houses that represents and ask yourself what needs to burn as a means of clarity so that the action or actions that you take are rooted in a sense of self and not just reacting to this chaos and mess. Because that is what chaos wants. It needs you to be chaotic because it feeds off of it. It sucks it up. It knows exactly what to do with it. So you have to meet chaos with a different type of chaos, something that is going to put it on its feet. It's that guerrilla warfare, right? That guerrilla pedagogy, that guerrilla way of living. Because if all we're doing is reacting, then we're not learning how to live, okay? And so when you're looking at the chart, this is the landscape for your story as astrology, because astrology is a storytelling art, right? And this is the big foundation of my process, Embodied Strategic Dreaming. We have to rewrite our stories as a way to rewrite histories so that we can then create new futures in the present. So this is about time, collapsing time, and centering it through you, through the body, through the ways in which you understand your constitution and how that constitution was constituted through the society that we're in. So, right, if we can take back time in the human, this is what the colonial stole. So if we can reconstitute time in the human, then we can reconstitute this thing called life. All right. And I'm going to be going over that more in the seminar, Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts, on July 12th. So this is just a little preview of that as well. So again, working with the chart, you can do it so many different ways. So see the story of the elements that are coming up for you. Okay. And let me know in the show notes below. I really am interested. So if something that you've noticed is popping up, let me know. And it's also a good way to share. And so other people can also read and reflect. And again, this is how we build knowledges in the public. So that folks can learn to embody their realities and not feel as if they're the only ones or that you're weird. We're all weird. If we all accept that we're fucking weird trying to figure this out, then we can let go of the ideas of being too cringe and actually lean into the messiness of being human, okay? And again, this is about stories and storytelling. And so let's get into some yapping time, because this to me is also what Uranus is going to try to help us do. Uranus is going to help us tell new stories alongside Neptune being in Aries and Pluto being in Aquarius. So why do I say that? I agree with Alice Sparkly Cat. She just released her newsletter for July, and I was reading it, and I was like, this is literally what I was writing for today's show. When she talks about, or they, excuse me, I don't know their pronouns. So they talk about this idea of Uranus and Gemini fractures empires. And I completely agree with that, because what Uranus and Gemini does is it disrupts. It's a rebellious energy to structures that purport themselves to be universal, that purport themselves to be quote unquote the best. Uranus and Gemini says, well, if that's true, I'm going to take a mirror to it. Gemini, the twin, duality. Right? If I take a mirror to what you are saying, what will actually last? So will it crack in when you look at yourself, because it's built upon a house and card of lies, right? And so the last transits that we saw of Uranus and Gemini showed us how unstable these structures were, even as they kept lying and saying that this was the only way, this being the colonial project that turned into the Western modern nation state, right? So being the higher octave of Mercury, we are having new ways open up for us to communicate and talk once Uranus goes into Gemini, because again, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So think how we're going to learn and communicate and talk across borders, boundaries, and legacies differently. So technology is here. Uranus also rules technology and innovation. Electricity was quote unquote discovered during Uranus and Gemini transit back in the 1800s. We see the ways technologies are used and weaponized during these times, because we're usually also in what? War. So technology is here. Same with Pluto and Aquarius. So it really is here. But we have a responsibility to learn what these technologies are and how they will impact us as a collective. Again, Pluto and Aquarius, because the first technology is your body. I said this last week. I'm going to keep saying it. The first technology is your body. And if you don't understand your body's technology, then external technologies can and will take over, and they will run you, as they have been doing us for a while, right? And so what Uranus in Taurus was reminding us alongside Pluto when he was in Capricorn was that you have a body. And if you have no body, you have no life. So then what stories does your body hold? What are the ancestors trying to say? Okay? What are your ancestors trying to say? What is your dad trying to say coming up through the body? What are the stories that need to come out for you to face? All right? Because Pluto in Aquarius is ushering them in. But not all dead are here for the living, because not all dead are here for our collective good. So do you know how to discern who and what you are hearing? Neptune in Pisces was an awakening, was this kind of beginning of the ability for folks to sit in more of the sacred, but you got to be careful because who are you learning from and why? Does the logic of even your spiritual practices make sense? Because everything needs to shift, everything needs to change. Tradition. Saturn in Aries is going to retrograde next week. We're going to talk about that some more next week's show. But a preview of this is with Saturn retrograding too, authority. Who do you give your authority up to and why, especially when it comes to spirit? Because we're going to see the rise of the charismatic leader once again. It's a time of chaos, a time of breaking, a time of air and fire. So there's an opening here, but do you know how to discern who and what makes sense based upon the logic of the technology of your body? Because again, if not, then you're going to be sold a bunch of goods, be sold that this new thing, this new technological advancement, now it's ChatGPT, machine learning. The next wave of the future is AI robots doing things for you. But if you are already being taken, if you're already having parts of your humanity removed, and now you get this external technology that is said to make quote unquote your life better, but you're not even living, then what life is being made better and for whom? Retrograde, reflection. Who do you give your authority to? That includes not just the people living, but also the primordials and the dead. What gods are you praying to? And again, are they living up to the end of the contract? I said this last week. We're going to keep talking about this. Okay? And if the god or the gods that you pray to have already told you that they have made you in their image, and their stories are nothing but them trying to figure out how to deal with what? Their emotions, their feelings. That in order for you to meet God, you got to meet your goddamn feelings. You got to meet your emotions. You got to meet your body because the God is in you. So how do you access that God? You got to come into the body, turn that technology on and ignite it, fire and air. So what is igniting you? What actually gets you going? Do you have and know your feet enough? Do you feel your feet enough so that you can own your head? Because the floor has always been moving. Now it's just very clear that it is nebulous out here. That chaos man will do exactly what he and his cronies know how to do. Create more discord to make you uneven so that you're just in reaction. And the reaction mode is what we have been taught through these systems and structures and schools that have not only whitewashed but completely made docile the historical record, filtered through only the lens of the state that needs us to understand both protest and rebellion through its perspective. Well, if we don't take the time to reflect and ask ourselves what makes sense, what are the histories that we also know? What are the things that don't make sense that we need to put at the table so that we can make sense out of nonsense and find different ways forward? Uranus and Gemini and saying you better because there's going to be nothing but nonstop shit coming at us. Change is here at the door. Foundations are cracked. What comes next? Gotta rewrite the story. Gotta rewrite our stories, y'all. And we write the stories by turning the body on. And when we turn the body on, it reminds us of something. It reminds us that we cannot live if we do not respect death. Because death has us understand the importance of life. So when you are actually in your body, when you are actually feeling, then you will start to grieve. You will start to feel, you will feel anger, you will feel all kinds of things. What's wrong with that? We have lived the past, let's just take the 2020s, okay? Just the 2020s. We have lived and are living through nonstop pandemics that shut the globe down, y'all. It shut the globe down. And we lost millions of people to that. Millions. Did we grieve them? Do our dead even know that they are dead? Then we went from that to being told to open up too quickly. And as we've opened up too quickly, the backlash came because now economics were put in jeopardy. The emperor having no clothes really became more apparent. So in the US, we were lied to. You told us we always got to go to work. People were able to stay home for a long time, get paid, and guess what? Shit kept going. So even the constructs and lies of the state, they had to reveal their hand when there needed to be change, because change was at the damn door. Change was knocking. This is when Pluto and Jupiter were in, Saturn and Jupiter were in Capricorn. Foundations, Earth. What happens when you break it open, right? You start to see the underneath the earth is what? Fire. The core of the earth is nothing but a molten lava. So if we've cracked the foundations, if we have revealed the kind of fissures that were always there, then what will come up? Fire. So we know how to work with it because it needs to burn something through. We need clarity, but if you do not know how to work with fire, it will work you. It will burn you up. It will burn everything up. And then you are left with fertile soil, but who is left to create and plant new seeds? That is the thing. We need people to be alive to plant new seeds. But in order for you to live, you must respect and honor death, because death shows us why we must then be living, be in the body, understand the importance of not just fight, but also pleasure, not just war, but of peace, a reconstituting of life through a non-patriarchal lens. What would that look like? Right? So all of this also means that we need a different understanding in relationship to aging so that we welcome the accumulation of years on this earth instead of fetishizing youth while also not giving youth any training or space to be youth in a society that does not even value childhood. We also don't value aging. So what the hell do we value? Because if you cannot allow yourself to accumulate years and learn from those years, then we do not get elders. We just get a bunch of old folks walking around with stunted emotions. So it is a rise in time of the new elders. So who are the new elders? Who are the ones creating and constructing the stories? Because you have lived enough and you've understood and believed your experiences enough, and you've listened to those who came before you so that you can create new concepts, new stories, tell old stories in new ways, create the fairy tales, create the myths, create the parables, because we need lessons, but we can only have lessons when we have elders. And in order to be a good ancestor, y'all, you got to be an elder first. You got to do it on earth. You got to face yourself. Uranus, Gemini, the twins. Can you face yourself? Can you face your knowing? Because the structure is going to be facing us, right? So do we understand our relationship to life by understanding our relationship to death? And if we value death, if we understand death, if we have this concept of sacred and mundane in a better balance, then why the hell we honor being walking dead? We must learn how to live. That is fire and air. That is the igniting. That is turning the body on. And that is saying no more. But no more to what? And what comes next? So Uranus is also a planet, right, that is reminding us that although it is a generational planet, it only takes 84 years to make its way through all the zodiacs. And again, Alice Barkley Cat was talking about this on their newsletter as well, because I was contemplating this idea of generations and eldership. And so the last time Uranus was in Gemini was between 1941 and 49. For many of us, this is both either our parents or grandparents. This is in our time. We already have known. We have people living who have already lived through this time period. And that was a time period of upheaval worldwide in various ways. Empire was cracking, literally. That's why we had the partitions. So do we learn from that time? The partitions of the Nakba in Palestine, you have the partition of Korea, you got India and Pakistan. Those are just some examples. There were plenty of more, y'all. Those were violent. They were violent. Why? Because the British fucking Empire was fracturing, and it did what it was what its progenitors did, the kind of template that it was also drawing from, that goddamn Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire cracked too, partitions were also a part of it, and it fractured things. It was violent in nature because they still wanted to maintain control, but didn't take the responsibility of ensuring that the next iteration was one that actually made sense. The British just threw their fucking hands up, put a goddamn template, put a couple of documents out and said, go have at it, after they disrupted for centuries those locations. So here we are again. What did we learn from that time? What did we learn from that time, y'all? Not replicating it, but understanding it, listening to those who lived through it. If we don't value aging, if we don't value older experiences, then there is no ability for us to have a new future. We're going to keep getting the same thing over and over again. If we keep looking to youth to do everything, if we keep invoking the dead who died young, but we don't even honor youth or childhood in the present day, then what the hell are we really doing? And so I really implore those of us in our 40s and 50s in particular, it is time to step up. Become new elders. And how do we do that? Not by doing the same shit our parents and grandparents did, by learning from them and asking ourselves, what is a different way to live? What are the stories we need to tell? What are the lessons that we need to teach? Right? And how do we do that? We can do that in so many different ways. It doesn't need to be in this kind of top-down authoritarian way, because that shit didn't work. We need to be the ones creating the new movies, creating the new TVs, creating the new kind of conversations, bringing back ideas of communing together outside of these big productions. You don't need a goddamn green wall with a neon sign and a whole ass spread in order to bring folks together. You just need a space and folks willing to bring what they got so that we can start to figure out what it means to share across once again. Which means we got to come back and find the selves, right? By finding our emotions. Because that's what's going to help us learn discernment. That's what's going to help us figure out who we can commune with and why, who we can build with and why, right? And that is how we come back into not just the self, but bring the sacred and mundane together, because that's how we find God, by finding ourselves, finding the God in you. And if we are made in the image of God or gods, and they came down to this earth to figure out what it means to be human, then to be sacred means you have to be in the mundane. To be connected to spirit means you got to be connected to your humanity, because it is the vessel, it is the conduit that channels spirit. And it is why that was the first thing taken when that war god decided to use his disciples to then, quote unquote, rule. So what does it mean to take that authority back? By taking back what was stolen, which is the human and the stories that align us to our humanity. Because to be human means we have culture. From the foundations of anthropology, we see throughout time and space what constitutes as human societies is language, art, music, and the like, and how we commune together. We can't do it alone. So, if we got all this outer planets changing into fire and air, technology and new ways and revolution and rebellion are here, then we better get clear about how to use the first technology given to us, which is our bodies, and how that interacts with the environment around us. And again, the astrology chart is one way that we see this, right? It's very clear. The first house is the only house of self, and the rest of them houses are about your relationship to other things or other people, all right? And since the body is also elemental, we are earth, air, fire, water, that allows spirit to come in, our spirit. The elements are a part of this, because the elements are the foundations of all technologies, no matter how innovative it is, right? They all require the same old ways and the same old resources, earth, air, fire, and water in some way. And that constitutes life. So do we know how to live? And do we know how to honor life? That, to me, is going to be the beginning of the story that these outer planets shifting are really going to be asking us. Okay, let me stop there, y'all. Next week, we get a full moon in Capricorn, go back to the earth signs, and Saturn goes retrograde. So let's continue this conversation next week, focusing on Capricorn and Saturn, all right? And again, join me July 12th if you want to kind of delve more into a lot of these topics. I'll be doing so in my seminar, Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts. It's $88 online, 3 hours. And it's one of the first offerings I'm officially putting in the public through my Embodied Futures Lab. I've done seminars before on ancestors in astrology, abolition in astrology. I'll be offering those in the future, but I wanted to introduce my lab with this offering first because it is the beginning of learning how to work with the body as part of my Embodied Strategic Dreaming Praxis, which is the methodology that underpins my lab. And I'm writing my book about that. So be on the lookout for that and send good vibes because trying to create, like I said, trying to create in chaos is chaotic. But for me, I'm finding that creating through the chaos is actually helping me find my own feet to navigate the chaos in a way that does not overtake me. So work with your creativity, y'all, because again, that is part of accessing our humanity. And in that accessing of the human, that's how you start to believe your reality, all right? So for more on that, join me on my seminar or join me on my Patreon, because that's where I've been talking about and experimenting with folks there as I prepare to launch things in the fall and winter, okay? And I think that's it for now. All right. So welcome in July. And I will be back next week. And as always, keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it's through the dreamscapes that we can bring the future to say we want into the present day. All right. Till next time. I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. Like Michelle sang, the cosmos, where we come from. The light that lit the way for our ancestors in the dark of night, when they had to leave the spaces that tried to steal their breath and life. Reworking, while also learning how to work with the land that was also being worked. A land and people under duress. The trees did not ask if they wanted to participate in such brutal practices. Yet here they were. Here we are. All beholden to a power structure that only knows how to take and never to give, while telling us this is the right way to live. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. As Michelle sang, the cosmos. The cosmos. We'll learn to imagine that freedom lied in parable of the sower that sowed the seeds of earth's seed that wanted to bring humans back to the stars, to start again, to start anew. Remember where we come from and who we are. The stars that lit the way, that guide the light. The moon that holds the tides of the waters. Our connection to earth and land. As above, so below. Yet we don't know, because we have lost the above and the below. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. And journey to the cosmos.